Welcome to Her Script, where we amplify the voices of female leaders who are making a difference and shaping the future of the life sciences industry. In today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Dawn Mattoon, CEO of Mercy BioAnalytics. She's an extraordinary woman who has held leadership roles in R&D, strategy, and general management at companies such as Invitrogen, Life Technologies, Thermo Fisher, and Cell Signaling Technology. Most recently, she served as a Senior VP for Clinical Diagnostics at Quanterix, where she led the development and commercialization of the company's first two FDA-authorized COVID-19 diagnostic tests and received Breakthrough Device designation for Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis diagnostics tests. Dr. Mattoon has developed and commercialized products across various proteomic and genomic technologies and is excited about advancing the innovative Mercy Halo diagnostic test portfolio for patients at Mercy BioAnalytics. She's earned her PhD in genetics with a focus on signal transduction from Yale University, where she also completed her postdoctoral fellowship. Let's welcome Dr. Mattoon to the show. Okay, well, welcome, Dr. Mattoon. Thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. I'm really excited to chat about really your personal leadership style, your leadership journey, insights that you have along your 20 plus years of experience, and just a little bit of background about who you are. I've listened to you before on the podcast Vibecast, where you shared a little bit about your early life trajectory. But for those who haven't heard your story yet, just tell us a little bit about your career journey and the path that led you to become a CEO.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. This is a treat, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's always hard to know where to start the storytelling because there are so many things that lead us eventually on a career path. I'll say I grew up in Colorado in a small rural town. And I was a good student in school, in high school, and was encouraged by teachers and by my family to go to college. We were a family of very limited resources, and so options for college for me at that time really were kind of state school, unless I could figure out another way to pay for it. And I ended up finding a really amazing program at a small liberal arts college in New York called Bard College. The program was called the Excellence in Equal Costs Scholarship. And essentially, if you were accepted into this scholarship program, Bard made the cost of attending the college the same as if you were attending your state college or state university. And it was really the only way that I was going to be able to afford to attend a school like Bard. And I was lucky enough to get that scholarship and ended up at Bard as an Excellence in Equal Cost Scholar. And that was really important for me because it allowed me to be surrounded by other really like-minded students who were passionate about scholarship, who were passionate about exploring the world, exploring interests broadly. And I ended up at Bard majoring in biology, and I was on a pre-med track. So I had done all of my pre-med requirements, and I was really, as you have to be, very much focused on the process of applying to med school. So I applied to medical school, I was accepted to medical school, I enrolled in medical school. And then quite late in my college career, in the spring of my senior year of college, realized that I had spent so much time and energy focused on getting accepted to med school that I hadn't really stopped to reflect in a very complete way about whether I wanted to practice medicine. And as I started to engage in that reflection, realized I really had very little interest in practicing medicine. I was really interested in just being accepted to medical school. And so I decided to take a step off that path. I ended up initially deferring med school for a year, ultimately let that go. And as a soon-to-be college graduate, my career options at that point were somewhat limited. So I ended up taking a position as a high school teacher. I was teaching in a boarding school in Southern California, biology and AP biology. I was coaching the track team and the cross country team, and I was working in the dormitory. And I did that for 3 years, and I met and married my husband now of 28 years, and, really, that experience of teaching high school was enormously influential in terms of the leader that I have become. So, much about teaching translates into leadership, and I think that's independent of the setting, but certainly it's been my experience, leadership in biotech. And I am really, really grateful for the time that I spent teaching for all kinds of reasons. I did ultimately go on and determine that what I wanted to pursue was a career in biotech, and so I went to Yale and did a PhD and postdoctoral fellowship at Yale. Had my first child towards the end of my PhD, and then my second child towards the end of my postdoc.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of responsibility all at once.
Yeah, it was we could probably talk for the whole hour about that adventure, but went on from my postdoc into, a career in biotech, and I've been doing that for the last 20 years.
That's incredible. One thing that really resonated with me is this reflection point that you learned to do so early on. You don't see that or you don't hear that very often with people, especially, the pressure of going on to med school and the excitement around that and the anticipation and maybe expectations from others. How did you know to trust yourself maybe and step back? Or was there someone that you leaned on for, support to make that decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I had always been encouraged by my family, by my parents to, um, pursue things that had meaning for me personally, independent of whether they were perceived to have meaning and significance, by society writ large. And so I think I was operating, even from my early days, in an environment where that permission was there. And it is absolutely true that, as I have become a leader and as I'm, more and more involved in coaching and mentoring and developing other employees, it's very hard for us to give ourselves this permission. And it's not just important in your 20s, it's important throughout the arc of your career to remain open to previously unconsidered possibilities, and that has continued to serve me well throughout my career.
It's important to be laser focused when it makes sense and you are, interested and excited about that. But when you're not, it's important to recognize that, step back and open up your scope a little bit more to see what other
Exactly.
options are out there. And it sounds like you did just that to create more for yourself, more fulfillment later on in your career.
Yeah, exactly.
If we look at the makeup of a leader, it seems that some people are predisposed to choosing a harder path sometimes, where others are born into the harder path and then overcome that adversity. Do either of those storylines resonate with you, or is there a different storyline?
You know, I think that we all encounter periods of difficulty, periods of challenge, and sometimes those are very apparent even from the outside, and sometimes they're not. And it's this is another lesson I've learned along the way is that you really, until you start to dig and know someone deeply, it's very dangerous to assume that you have a good understanding of the level of challenge that they have encountered, are currently navigating, will encounter in the future. And so I have had certainly big challenges in my life, hard parts to the path that I've needed to navigate. But I think that's actually true for most people if you look across the whole arc of their experience.
Everybody has a major challenge or challenges, sometimes spread out, sometimes all at once. And
Yes.
and it's just a matter of figuring out how to navigate through that and having the determination to know, trust yourself that you can get through it.
Well, and I think that's actually another important lesson for me that I've learned maybe through hard experience is leaning into the smaller moments of challenge, learning that you can navigate those
Right.
successfully, almost builds a muscle memory so that when those big challenges come along, the really hard things come along, you know that you've got it. You know that you can do it because you have done it in smaller ways along the path.
That's really great insight. It was almost building trust in yourself, really. It's just as long as you
Exactly.
can step back, you've got a really great aspect of reflection that it seems that it really runs through your core, your core values.
It does for me personally, and I'll say this lesson applies absolutely in the same way in the context of leading a business. As teams, we encounter difficult moments. They can be technical challenges, they can be financial challenges, they can be regulatory challenges. They come in all flavors. But if we don't take the opportunity to drive not just the learnings, but the confidence to
Mhm.
navigate those smaller challenges as organizations, then it makes it very hard when the big problems arise, as they inevitably do for us
Yep.
personally as human beings and also for us leading in the context of a business.
Yep. 100%. I want to just explore a little bit more about the values that influence your decision making, the company culture, your own personal leadership style in general, or what are your core values as a leader and how did you develop them?
Yeah, I'll say anchoring for me, there are, of course, a number, but anchoring for me, I think, is authenticity. And for me, when I use that word, it's not just honesty or directness or transparency. Those are elements, but the one that I've really focused on because it's been so instructive and so helpful for me as I've grown as a leader is seeking to show up as your truest self. And that is it's something that requires a huge amount of vulnerability because sometimes our truest selves we may fear are not going to be appreciated, valued, liked, recognized, seen, and the temptation to try to manifest in the way that you think is gonna be liked and valued and seen is very powerful, even when that may not feel authentic to you, and I came to this understanding through a series of not so great experiences as a young leader, as an emerging leader, trying to show up the way I thought people expected me to. And particularly in my early leadership roles, I was mostly on teams with men, and I carried this completely inaccurate perception at the time that I would be more successful if I showed up like the men on my team.
Mm.
And in that particular culture at the time, that meant loud, that meant a lot of bad language, that, there was a aggressiveness, and I experimented with trying on that persona, and it just was a total failure because it was not authentic to me, and I think it's a failure for a couple of reasons. One is that as human beings, I think we have pretty good BS detectors. We can tell when someone is being inauthentic, um, but also it's exhausting to show up as an inauthentic version of yourself. It's depleting in a way that robs you of energy and spark and all the things that are so important in leading
Intuition.
successfully. Exactly. The temptation is very powerful, and I think particularly as we're emerging as leaders, and it took me longer than I wish it had, to really understand that.
Do you think that had anything to do with a lack of role models?
I think it's yeah, I think it's probably most productive to think about it as a lack of diversity in general,
Mm.
and I think we've improved in that area as businesses, as leaders, and that's not at all to say that, that we've done all the work that needs to be done. I think it's better than when I started my career 20 years ago, but needs to continue to be an area of focus.
I think everybody knows the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, do not follow where the path may lead, go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. Being a leader can be really challenging at times. How would you say you stay resilient and motivated when times get tough or you have to bushwhack a new trail?
I draw here, I think, an analogy to something that I have been drawn to in my personal life, which is as a long distance runner for many years until I completely destroyed my knees and had to give it up. And in particular, running marathons and doing longer distance triathlon. And I am by no means talented at doing those things. They are generative for me. They were an important kind of centering activity for me for a long time. And I think the reason is because when you're engaged in a marathon, let's just say in this example, you have to go to a place and ask things of yourself that are pretty profoundly uncomfortable. And when you go to that place, you have to wrestle around with your limits. And your limits as described in that moment, given your level of fitness and training and rest and all the rest of it. And I have found that those experiences of going deep into the well, really asking more of my body than it might feel like I want to give, has carried through into my work in business, so that when I'm working through a big challenge, have had a big setback, feeling the inevitable fatigue and burnout that comes with doing hard things, I know that I can go into the well and that there's more waiting for me there. And I can ask that of myself in moments that really require it. So I've kind of leaned on those experiences in running and other types of athletics because I can draw on that same reserve in the context of my work.
It's like practice pre-gaming in a way. And I've run a couple of marathons myself where I've had to train and get out at 4 a.m. on a Wednesday morning before
Yep.
work to do my, medium to long runs on those days. And I just remember thinking, okay, I've got to do this. There's a longer goal in the very end. There's no immediate gratification happening for the
Yeah.
several months. But there's a goal and I'm going to see. It's almost like a challenge. How far can I
Yeah.
go? And thinking, I often think about that myself in my own career now, where I talk to my daughter who's 4 about this, and she, I was trying to open a bottle, like a screw top to a bottle is really hard. My 4-year-old goes, "Mommy, you can do hard things."
Oh, I
You
love that. You are clearly a good role model.
So I think about those challenges, and there is a well deeper than what you immediately can appreciate.
Yeah.
But you have to go there and you have to just spend the effort and you just have to tie your shoes,
Yeah,
take that first step.
exactly.
Has your understanding of what authenticity means for leadership evolved over time? Do you see authenticity looking different from when you first appreciated it to now?
Not so much that my understanding of or definition of authenticity has shifted. I feel more comfortable showing up that way
Mm.
than I did earlier in my career. And if there was something that I could go back and tell my younger self, I think it would be an encouragement around leaning into that more fully earlier.
I think that's so important. I wish I could tell my younger self the same. Yeah. In this same spirit of authenticity, can you share any significant failures or even setbacks or moments of doubt in your career or in your life? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, too many to count, probably. I think like all of us. For me, the setbacks in the work setting, meaning there's a technical setback, there's a financial setback. Those are plentiful across 20 years of work, and I think those are disappointing but expected. The ones that have been the most challenging for me to navigate are more related to my own professional growth and my vertical progression and moments, in particular moments when I feel ready to do more, to take on more, and that perception is not mirrored in my manager. It's not
Mhm.
shared by my manager. And as I've gone through the last 20 years over the course of the career thus far, I think there's two productive ways to respond to that, and it's very situational. The first is, and this is always my starting point, really trying to, again, authentically and with humility reflect on whether my perception is inaccurate and that
Mm.
there is, in fact, more for me to learn, more skills for me to develop, experiences that I need to gain. And that absolutely has sometimes been the conclusion that I've reached after I've come to this point of tension with feeling like I'm ready for more and a manager not sharing that perspective. But there have been a couple of situations where I've done the reflection, I've examined the situation, and come to the conclusion that there is a more fundamental disconnect between the value I know I can bring and the way that value is received. And in those cases, the right thing to do is to make a transition and find a situation where what you have to offer can be more fully appreciated and maybe is actually more valuable because of the circumstance or the nature of the organizational challenges. And so I've gotten a little bit better as I've gained more experience in discerning which of those two scenarios I'm in, but that's very hard, and I don't know that that comes any other way except through lived experience.
It's almost like a hit to your ego where you're like,
It's
"Ah,
not
I really
almost,
think
it
that
is,
it
and it's
is.
hard.
It is." And then it is very hard. And to accept that and then to retract from that position that you had into a more humble position and say, okay, I need more
Yeah.
time or I need a different set of experiences. Ooh, that's tough, but those are the moments of life lessons. Those are the transitional moments.
And that can catalyze real growth, meaningful growth.
It's a gift right in front of you, even though it hurts the ego.
Exactly.
And then the other one where, you really assess that you need to make that transition. It's a leap of faith, essentially, into another realm of
Mhm.
development. And you're saying, okay, I really do believe and trust in myself. I'm just going to make that leap and calculate it, I'm sure, into that
Yeah.
next step.
Yeah.
So very good advice. Are there any other practices or habits that you employ to help you remain authentic in your leadership role?
I would say I am incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by people who believe in me, love me, care for me, and call me on my nonsense when they see it. I think that's true for certainly for my family. I've got an amazing partner in my husband. As I mentioned, we've been married for 28 years. We've been together for 30 years. We've got two great kids, both of whom are in college. So emerging adults. And they are, as family does, always quick to point out when I am drifting into territory that starts to feel like a departure from the person that they know me to be and really know me to be. And I would say the same is true for the team that we've created at Mercy BioAnalytics, the company where I'm currently the CEO. It's been a deep privilege for me to have the opportunity here to build the management team from scratch. There was essentially no management team when I arrived. And so with that opportunity, what I've really tried to prioritize is bringing in functional leaders who are incredibly talented and experienced in their particular function, but who also have a ton of humility. And what that means is we can each represent with a lot of confidence perspectives from our experience and education and function. And we can argue and debate with a lot of energy, but none of us have to be right all the time. And so we have this really wonderful energy as a management team, and that absolutely cascades into the organization. And I can say without any equivocation that the folks on my management team and in the organization broadly have no trouble pointing out when they think I am either bringing an energy that's not productive, bringing a perspective that's divergent from their own. And I love that. I think as leaders and particularly as executives, we need to surround ourselves with people like that in order to keep on the path to delivering our business objectives as productively as possible.
And as a byproduct, almost you get the thicker skin too, right? Because you get that ability to handle that kind
Kinda.
of
Yeah.
feedback all the time. Um, what strategies have you implemented to promote diversity and inclusion within your team, your organization, your leadership?
Yeah, I think the starting point has to be to recognize that we all carry unconscious bias, and that isn't something that is easily shed. I'm not sure it's possible to shed. And so for me, the first step in working to create an ever more diverse, ever more inclusive workplace is just to own that truth that we all have unconscious bias and we need to be continually examining them. And to the degree that it's possible, implementing checks and measures and processes that help us to safeguard against bias and ensure that we're moving towards a more equitable environment. So I'm a big fan of the adage, what gets measured gets managed. Here at Mercy, we track things like compensation as a function of gender and as a function of level, making sure that we are paying equitably, building a diverse management team, a diverse board of directors. Our board of directors is equal men and women. But we have more work to do. And the good news is we are small and we are growing, so we're going to have the opportunity to do that work as we continue to grow. The other thing that I would say is that there are obvious and readily identifiable parameters of diversity that are important for us to measure and manage. And there are some that are less evident. And here I'm thinking about diversity of style, of working style, of communication, of the way we attack problems. I think we want those elements of diversity to be celebrated in the organization as well. One of the things we've done that I plan to continue, there's a tool, it's called disc profiling. And it's essentially
Oh, I know
yeah, so
disc.
so you
Yes.
you know it. It's a tool that allows us to better understand our own style in terms of working, communicating, navigating challenge. And so we've taken the whole organization through disc profiling now twice, last year and again this year. And new employees also, as they join us at their 90-day mark, have a disc profile done. And for sure, there are insights that we get about ourselves, and those are valuable and would be worth doing the exercise just for those. But I have found the most valuable part of the exercise is understanding better how your style intersects with that of another person, particularly someone whose style is very different from your own. The aha moments that I see in the team when they start to understand why they've been talking past someone else for the last year and feeling these sources of tension and conflict that are completely rooted or almost completely rooted in these elements of working style and communication style. Even in a small organization, the clarity and consistency of communication is essential. And this is really where the time I spent teaching has borne fruit. Because in a classroom environment, say in a high school environment like where I was teaching, it's a group of people and you want to take them on a journey. In that particular example, you want to take them on a learning journey and have them arrive with you at a shared destination. And it's certainly in the setting of a high school classroom, certainly in the setting of a small biotech startup, they don't come on that journey just because you ask them to or because you are their boss. They need to be inspired. They need to be compelled. They
Mm,
need to understand the why and not just the what. And they need to have a connection to that why so that they can be with you in the hard doing of the what. And so I really have drawn on the lessons from the years I spent teaching in the way that I approach communicating within an organization. And it exists in a couple of planes. So the goal for me is alignment, clarity. The team has a shared understanding of where we're going, why it matters, how we're going to get there, and maybe most importantly, what is their role in that enterprise so that they feel
mm,
personally connected to the journey that's going to take place. So at the moment, Mercy has 40 employees, give or take. Probably about two-thirds of them, maybe three-quarters of them are here in the Boston office. The rest are either hybrid or remote. And so our communications need to take that into account. We can't just have on-site things. We need to make sure that we're including our remote and hybrid folks. So I do a 30-minute, we call it the Heart of Mercy meeting each week. And it's kind of topical, whatever the interesting and relevant events of the last week that's just passed or of the week coming up. We talk about those as a team. And then monthly we meet for a longer session for an hour. These are a little bit more structured, a little bit more formal updates on business operations, market dynamics, things like that. At each of those, though, whether it's the weekly Heart of Mercy or our monthly all hands meeting, we'll take the last 5 minutes or so and anchor on one of the company's values. We have these articulated corporate values. And each week I spend, it's 5 minutes, but it's a really important part of the meeting where we reflect on the way that that particular value is manifesting in the context of our day-to-day work in the business. And what we're seeing that is celebrating and reflecting that value, what we may be concerned about, and encouragement to the team to be especially cognizant of a particular value as we enter into something that's coming up in the future. So those are our meetings that we do with the whole organization. A practice I've implemented more recently is for new employees, 45 days after they start, I meet with them one-on-one. And I like that 45-day mark because they've had enough time to get their legs under them. They're working. They have a plan when they show up each day. They know what to do. But they're not so tenured that they've completely drunk the corporate Kool-Aid. They can still see us with clear eyes. And so it's a great opportunity to get a perspective check. How's it going? How's your onboarding been? What are you observing? Is this what you expected? How accurate were we in describing the work and the organization? So I've really gotten valuable insights from those 45-day check-ins. And then the last thing I do is every 3 or 4 weeks, I assemble a random group of 3, 4, 5 employees, meet with them as a group for a skip level check-in. And those are unscripted. There's no agenda. But I always, at some point during the conversation, ask them what's keeping them up at night. And it has been really helpful for me to hear directly from the folks that are in the trenches doing the work day to day, where their areas of challenge are, so that I can do one of the things that's the most important parts of my job, which is remove obstacles so that the team can do their work as productively and efficiently as possible.
If I know that you're an executive mentor for Bright Edge, which is an investment and venture capital arm of the American Cancer Society, can you tell us about your experience as a mentor for this organization?
Yeah, I'll maybe introduce Bright Edge a little bit. We first came to know Bright Edge. This is the venture arm of the American Cancer Society when we were raising our Series A financing round last year. And they ultimately did invest in our Series A, and we were absolutely thrilled. They were incredibly thoughtful, incredibly diligent. And the woman that leads Bright Edge is, her name is Alice Pamponio, is a force of nature, someone you just so glad is in your life. She makes you better. And so when they first launched, they call it the Bright Edge Entrepreneur Program, probably more than 6 months ago now. I was quick to put my hand up and volunteer to be part of the executive mentor group. And so it's a relatively small cohort. I think probably less than a dozen emerging founders are part of the cohort, and they're paired with a similar number of executive mentors. We were each matched individually with 1 or 2 of the mentees, and then they have access to all of us for one-on-ones should they need it. And it's been great fun for one reason, because they're a fantastic group of founders doing really cool, innovative work. The 2 women that I've been spending the most time with are both doing really amazing work in women's health and women's cancer.
That sounds fulfilling and exciting in a way, just diversifying where you spend your time and able to feel like you can really give back in a really meaningful way and a very visible way.
This is hard work that we do, and it's a hard environment in which to do it right now. The capital environment is really constrained, and yeah, I see even companies that have very promising technologies are failing because it's so difficult to secure capital. In this environment, unfortunately, having a great technology is not enough.
Mm.
You have to have the full complement of elements in your business plan, your regulatory strategy, your reimbursement strategy. And that's really, I think, the unique feature about the Bright Edge Entrepreneurs Program is that it exposes these founders to that full complement of expertise, just trying to maximize their chance to bring these innovations forward into the market.
Obviously, you have a passion for mentoring others. Did you have any mentors throughout your career? And can you share any examples of an impactful mentorship relationship that you've had?
Yeah, I've had impactful mentors throughout my career, I would say inclusive of my time in graduate school and really even going all the way back to my time teaching right up through until today. I continue to benefit from the mentorship of others. And I am a first-time CEO, so this is as important to me now as it has been at any other point in my career. There are probably two mentors that I would highlight for very different reasons for me at this particular moment in my career as I'm learning the craft of leading a startup in this environment. The first of those is my board chairman, who's a guy named Stan Lapidus. And if you don't know Stan or anyone listening doesn't know Stan by name, certainly they'd be familiar with his work. Stan was one of the co-inventors of Cologuard for colorectal cancer screening and the founder of Exact Sciences. And additionally, he invented a technology called FinPrep, which revolutionized cervical cancer screening. Founded a company called SciTech, which was acquired by Hologic. And so he is really deeply, deeply knowledgeable about cancer screening, about cancer screening companies that are startups. And he's been incredibly generous with his time and patience with me as I've moved into this role and continue to learn the ropes as a new CEO. So I'm humbled by how generous he's been with his time. I feel really, really fortunate to get to benefit from his experience. And he is the chairman of our board. So my relationship with him sits underneath that definition. And so it has a certain formality to
Hmm.
it. The second mentor that's been really instrumental for me as a new CEO over the last couple of years is a woman named Sarah Khalil. And I first came to know Sarah when she was a regulatory advisor at my last company, but she and I became good friends, and she has continued as an advisor for Mercy in regulatory matters and other areas. Sarah is herself a CEO of a medical device company doing really amazing, innovative work in cardiac space. And Sarah is the person I can go to with all of my dumb questions. And I've had a lot of them in the couple of years since I moved into the CEO role, because it's just like, it's like any new thing. There's a whole language that you have to learn, a whole new vocabulary that you have to internalize. And there's no cliff notes. There's no manual for this.
Mm.
And I've been really lucky that I can call Sarah up at any given moment and say, please explain to me what these 10 words are that I have never heard in my life, that I can interact productively in certain areas that I just haven't been exposed to before. The nuances of closing a financing round, that was a
Mhm.
brand new experience for me, a ton that I needed to learn in order to do that successfully.
If you had a piece of advice, what advice would you give to aspiring leaders looking to approach a potential mentor?
I think the first piece of advice would be going back to what we talked about earlier, the importance of reflecting on the motivation. And the reason I say that is because leading is hard. Leading demands a tremendous amount of us, and it's incredibly rewarding. It's incredibly fulfilling. I'd encourage anyone with an authentic motivation to do it, but if that authentic motivation isn't there, and instead the energy to be in a leadership role is connected to some perception of power or authority, those are the wrong reasons to go there. So my first encouragement really is do that reflective work. But if someone determines that the genuine motivation is there, the authentic motivation is there, then my second piece of advice would be to seek out I've heard this is not my term. This was a term that I was introduced to many years ago, but seek out kind of a personal board of directors, a plurality of mentors. I think the right number is maybe 3 or 4 who each can bring something different to a mentoring relationship. And the example I just shared with Stan Lapidus and with Sarah Khalil, they offer me completely different things in terms of mentors for me. Both have been vital in my experience as a new CEO. I also think, just like I was so quick to want to give back in the context of the Bright Edge Entrepreneurs Program, I think most people want to and have energy for giving back in this way. And so my experience, both having been approached and approaching others, is the answer is almost always yes, if the motivation is genuine.
It makes it easier to connect, and it makes it easier for someone to say yes after a connection too, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
every day you're working. I'm sure there's probably times on the weekends, maybe often, you're probably working as well. So when you do want to step away from work or when you just need to clear your head, what do you do to recharge?
My go-tos have continued to be fitness, not in the same way that I could do when I was younger, but I continue to go to the gym probably 4 or 5 days a week. I make time for that. I'm an outdoors girl, so hiking, paddling, things that bring me closer to nature have been all of my life really restorative for me. And it is 100% true that this is a 7-day-a-week gig. So I really try to think about work-life balance more on macro cycles than micro cycles. I'm in a cycle right now as a new CEO of an emerging startup where there's more energy being put into the work and a little less energy being put into some of
Uh,
these other things. But that is the right decision, not only because the business demands it of me, but because I love it. I love this work. I feel lucky to do it. And so that in and of itself is generative for me,
mm.
is maybe not restorative, but is generative. And so it nets out okay. And I'm in a cycle in my life where that's a reasonable choice. My kids are off at college. There's no one desperately missing me at home. And so I'm in the fortunate position to be able to make that trade-off at this moment in this particular cycle.
What's the best and or worst piece of advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I ever received was, one of the most impactful things you can do for an employee is not just tell them that they're doing a great job and having an impact and that they're valued, but to find a way to tell their family that they're doing a great job and have an impact and are valued. And the way that was really brought home for me was I had gotten this advice. I'd been sort of looking for the right opportunity. And I at the time, this was at my last company, I used to like to spend time down in the warehouse helping the guys pack the boxes. It just was a way to connect with that part of my organization. And I happened to be down there in the warehouse one day, and I overheard um, the head of our warehouse team talking to his dad on the phone. And it was clear he was working through a challenging clinical situation. And I said to him afterwards, this individual's name was Joe. I said, Joe, I would love to email your dad and just tell him what a great job you're doing. Tell him how much we think of you and how much we value you. And he said, that would be amazing, except my dad is blind. He can't read email. I said, let me call him. Give me his number. I'm going to give him a call. And so I called Joe's dad, and I spent 10 or 15 minutes on the phone with him. This was not a long conversation. It required very little of my time. And I told him how much we loved Joe and what a great job he was doing and how much he was valued. And shortly after that, Joe's dad got COVID, and he was hospitalized and he died.
Oh my
But
goodness.
before he died, he told every doctor and every nurse and every person who came into the room that the senior vice president of the company called me to tell me what a great job my son was doing. And what a gift to give Joe's dad, and how little it cost me to do it. So I've continued to really both try to look for opportunities to do that. I'm sure I'll never have a chance to do it in quite that way again, but that's advice I now pass along to others because, man, that is a pretty incredible thing to get to do.
That's great. I think about my dad and how he would react to that. I know he'd probably react very similarly. Okay, we're getting to the end of this episode, and I just want to give you a chance to do some audience shout outs. So you've talked about Stan, you've talked about Sarah. Are there any other people that you would want to give a shout out to who have influenced your career?
There are some really incredible women working in biotech right now, and in particular in diagnostics, which is the area where I'm focused in. Bondi Anderson is one, Oriana Papins-Gobi is one, Priyana Jain is one, Reedy Tarial is one, and there are, I'm so proud to say, many others. I feel like we're emerging into a period now where that's not so unusual. It's not a surprise when you encounter a woman who's just crushing it in diagnostics, and I feel privileged to be a part of that company.
Well, in closing, where can listeners go to keep up with what you're doing?
Probably LinkedIn is the best place. I'm an occasional poster, but I do try to put content out that's relevant to what we're doing in the company, and also my perspectives on the space as it is evolving so rapidly.
Great. Wonderful. Well, you've heard it, listeners. Please go and follow Dr. Mattoon and check out Mercy BioAnalytics and make sure you keep up with what they're doing as well. It'll be exciting to keep up with you. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining me here on HerScript.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of HerScript. We hope you found inspiration in Dr. Mattoon's journey from the small town upbringing to leading in the biotech industry. Her story is really a testament to the power of staying true to herself, embracing diversity, and fostering inclusive teams. As we've learned, leadership isn't just about guiding others. It's really about self-reflection, adaptability, and the courage to push through even the toughest moments. Before we wrap up, I'd like to remind us of the incredible impact recognizing and valuing those around us has been both in and out of the workplace. Whether you're leading a team, mentoring a rising star, or simply navigating your own career path, these lessons are invaluable. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share with others who might benefit from these insights. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and stay true to your values.